Stephen Paul has always taken his work home with him. For 27 years, Paul has run Arroyo Design, a Tucson-based shop that makes fine furniture from local mesquite wood. On quiet weekend evenings, Paul would bring home his wood scraps and use them in the barbecues he enjoys with his wife, often over a glass of scotch.
I've always told her when we're barbecuing, those are our profits going up in smoke. And so one evening she said, why couldn't we malt barley over a mesquite fire instead of a peat fire? This is a really good single malt whiskey.
Traditional distillers make scotch, a type of whiskey, by fermenting barley that has been dried over a peat fire. But now Paul found himself wondering about his wife's question. What would happen if you dried it over mesquite instead?
And I just couldn't get it out of my mind, and so I obviously have always had a lot of mesquite scraps, so I first actually I ordered a little copper pot still, little 5-gallon guy from Portugal. And this was in late 2006, and early 2007 it arrived, and I started just learning how to make a single malt whiskey. We're at about 151 right now. And so the grain has cooled down the water to right about where we want.
After years of experimentation, Paul's mesquite whiskey started to taste good. So good that he attracted attention and an investor. That's how his new company, Hamilton Distillers, was born. In a back room of his woodworking shop, Paul and a tiny crew of volunteers began crafting Sonoran Desert whiskey. 450 bottles later, they have a distributor and a growing fan base.
And I know I've been really shocked and humbled by how quickly it's been accepted, and I mean, we're basically sold out. The mesquite clear.
You could repeat that process to get higher.
Michael Hyan, a University of Arizona chemist, says Paul is part of a long history of humans trying to distill things to their essence.
People first distilled water just to purify it, to get a clean product, right? You want something it's safe to drink. And that's probably dates to the 1st century. There are records of people distilling things back then. And aside from that, people would distill things like perfume. The Chinese distilled human urine to isolate concentrated compounds that they would then use as aphrodisiacs on others. And that dates to the first millennium. So, I mean, there's lots of uses of distillation to increase human happiness somehow.
Using distillation to make alcohol from grain dates back hundreds of years, and Hyan says it's as much a science as it is an art. The first step is malting, which includes soaking the grains to help them sprout and then drying the results.
And malting the grains releases enzymes present in the seeds. It's germinating, and those enzymes can then be activated. And the job of those enzymes is to take all these starches, these very long polymers of sugar, in the grains and turn them into simple sugars. In other words, just 1 or 2 chains that yeast can use as food. The malting also imparts flavor to your final product.
That's because other molecules created by the malting process, like the smoke molecules from the mesquite fire Paul uses to dry his barley, also wind up in the mix. Distillers then cook the malted grains to break down their sugars and proteins even further.
In other words, we're taking all these things and breaking them up into basic building blocks so that yeast can thrive. And the yeast do the job of turning the sugars into alcohol for us.
The yeast ferment the cooked grains, or mash, and leave a mix of water and ethanol, or alcohol, behind. Then it's time to bring on the heat.
The way this works is they have different boiling points. Ethanol has a lower boiling point than water. So if we heat this up, the ethanol is going to boil off first.
Distillers capture that boiled-off alcohol and cool it so it condenses. The resulting liquid is richer in alcohol than the fermented mash they started with. Then they age the liquid in barrels, where it picks up more flavor from the wood. After that, distillers cut the heads and tails. That means bottling only the distilled liquid that has the exact mix of alcohols and flavors they want. It's a tricky art, Hyan says.
It's getting really close.
From the beginning to the end, it's always constantly evolving. Those molecules are changing structure. They impart the flavor and the character and the taste that you want in your final sample.
Hyan says much of what we take for granted has its roots in this complex bit of chemistry.
Distilling affects your life every day. You get in a car and you drive, it's because someone took the crude oil out of the ground, fractionated it, and distilled it to separate it into different compounds that you can use to fly around, you can use to drive, you can use to cook your steak in the evening. So all of these things are industrial processes that have their roots in distillation.
Still is volatile.
Distillation has turned Stephen Paul's world upside down. Now Hamilton Distillers is moving on to larger scale production. They're looking for a larger facility, bigger equipment, and more help. Paul's passion for turning mesquite scraps into spirits has transformed him, too. He's closing the business that has sustained him and his employees for so long. He says he's sure they'll land on their feet, but the change is still bittersweet.
Luciano has been with me for 26 years. Will has been with me for about 8 years, so it's kind of hard that way, but yeah, they'll have work for sure. So when I started the furniture business, Arroyo Design, it came from a place of wanting to make something that would last for generations, make something of quality, and use this material that grows where I'm from. And so the Hamilton Distillers project kind of grew out of the same thing. It's always been really important to me to feel a part of the place you are.
And now, whiskey drinkers will be able to taste it, too.